boys, have you been monitoring the situation?
No.
Monitoring.
I love it.
Have every situation on one screen, yeah.
Exactly right. I have the sniffles. I am incredibly sniffly. I think you can hear the sniffles.
And I operated on my teeth and they hurt, and I am in a horrible mood.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, Habibi. Oh, okay.
Cavities.
Well, I mean, I think
this is my second part going.
Oh.
I think I already did a bit about like difference between male
Yeah.
doctor and female doctor.
Yeah.
They counterstate their gender norms, I guess.
Mm.
Well, today's topic will surely pucker you up in the best of ways.
Pucker you up. Perk you
not
up.
a good, pucker, why not pucker? What's wrong with pucker?
Pucker brings to mind a sphincter, perhaps, or
Ooh, maybe is that what you had in mind, JT? JT came on, by the way, today. There's no camp today, but he came on. And I'm like, what the fuck did they do to my boy? He looks like he's fucking shaved his head. He looks like he got his hair stuck in a lawnmower and it just fucking shredded his shit.
Well, I've got big headphones and I had my hair slicked back, and I got a big old white person forehead, so he was like, where's your hair?
These fucking Frankenstein headphones that he has, covering all his luscious curls. About the forehead, or the five head, more appropriately. When you have it slicked back where your curls are not falling down.
Bro, yeah.
But,
why do you think I have the curls over my face?
Yeah, well, I like it. I like it when you look at me in between those beautiful braided curtains of yours.
Anyway.
Braided curtains. Holy mother of horny. Jesus Christ.
I need to be a bit calmer. All right, look, I hope everybody's fasts are going well, inshallah. It's a blessed month. It's been an incredibly blessed month because of things that we're going to talk about soon. But more importantly than this, JT, have you noticed gas prices?
Yeah, dude. Like, you think I'm driving right now? I'm walking everywhere, and it's not safe to do.
You might get attacked by the 6 people that still have enough money to fill up their
killdozer.
Are they called Hummers?
Yeah.
The really oversized, they're like the military jeeps.
Yeah, enormous.
And the thing that I don't understand is, like, I mean, for some people who live in countries where this is normal, you see these and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like it's just a regular part of everyday life. I saw a Hummer once in real life, and I was like, oh, like of course they're gonna make it smaller than the actual like real life military jeeps that I saw when I was younger. And no,
somehow they're bigger.
They're they're basically the same size. I'm like, this is a military occupation vehicle. This is not something you take your fucking 3-year-old to school to.
Yeah.
What is
the
this?
Hummers? The military ones are like low and wide and flattish, but the civvy ones are just dense. They're just chunks, and there's no room inside them either. Like many years ago, I was a valet, and anytime one of those came, I was like, man, I'm 5'9" and I barely fit in the driver's seat. This thing is just stupid. This is dumb.
Yeah.
I love how both in The Sopranos, the most annoying characters drive a Hummer the same way they also play it in Better Call Saul. So in The Sopranos, you have Chris
I know
Moltisanti.
you didn't just slander my Christopher.
Oh, yeah, no, fucking hate Christopher. Christopher's an absolute cunt, man. And the most irredeemable character, even compared to Tony. Like, no discussion. Like, he is on the same wavelength as the other guy who drives a Hummer. Like, he's irredeemable just because he drives a Hummer. Like, you replace a Hummer with a fucking Maserati. Like, let's not even talk about his, insanely, domestic abuse on steroids, using every excuse that you can fucking use. Like that to the side, his taste in cars is an affront to God. Same like how the fucking guy that sells opioids in Better Call Saul. I don't know if you watched it. It's one of the best actors on the planet. A guy called, fucking Mark Proksch. Fucking Google that right now. Mark Proksch is the most underrated actor on planet Earth.
Yeah.
He always kind of low-key plays the same character, which is an absurdly awkward, strange, but most importantly, annoying guy.
Yeah.
Which, let's be honest, the only way you can properly play a character like that is if you are the most charismatic, non-self-centered, relaxed dude that he plays the opposite of everything that he represents,
Yeah.
Like, that meme about how some of the world's like greatest comedic actors, they end up like offing themselves. They do hyper comedy because they're like very sad. That's very unfortunate. Well, this man is the opposite. He is so happy about existing that he intentionally just plays characters that like are supposed to dread every moment when they catch another breath, right?
Yeah.
So him in Better Call Saul drives like a Hummer that has like it basically looks like a Toys R Us car or one of those. Remember those little cars that you can that they used to sell as kids?
Yeah.
Like limited,
the big wheels. Yeah.
The big wheels. Yes. So. His head was like yellow with red flames on it, literally like straight out of a cartoon. So when I hear a Hummer, I think of these two particular characters, and I don't know which one is worse. But hey, at least the guy from Better Call Saul didn't.
Oh, I'm gonna have to bleep that. I don't want any spoilers in my show.
Yeah, sure, that's fair.
I don't want to spoil the 30-year-old. It is like 30 years old, right?
Yeah.
It is. It's
I still haven't seen it though. I should.
It's so good.
I know that you say that just to annoy me, and now also JT. So now finally with JT we can relate to something similar when it comes to
anything.
To this particular thing.
You are my living Sopranos character. Why would I need to watch this show?
Son of a bitch.
I practically live with one.
That's fair. That's perfectly fair. But don't look at any of my. but now I'm gonna be like toxic and annoying about a thing that my like IRL friends were toxic and annoying about, and that's watching Attack on Titan.
No,
I never did.
Dude,
and
it's great.
No,
oh my god, no, you watched it? I didn't know. Oh my god, why have you not been annoying at me? Like, come on, this is what friends are for.
The thing is,
I thought we were
like,
close.
it's
like the closest thing two friends can do is. And
I'm an OG weeb when it comes to this.
Okay.
I watched. It was back when it was coming out weekly.
No way.
What the fuck? Yeah, back in the day.
You are ancient, bro. Holy shit.
Watched it. It was me and oh my god, this is. Yeah, no, absolutely. It was great. Good university memories.
Oh, that I can't.
But,
I still can't do it. I know viewers and Hakeem, you have tried to give me a foot in the door anime here and there, and it makes me squirm. It makes me so uncomfortable, all of it.
I am the same. First 4 episodes were literally unwatchable.
Yeah.
I texted 2 of my IRL friends, and I literally told them, like go fuck yourself. And then I kept watching. 2 episodes later, I texted them, I'm like, oh, no, I get it. Fuck, I get it. Son of a bitch, I get it. It's very good.
Like, especially the first 3 seasons, you're like, oh my god, and then it really kind of falls flat at the end, sadly. And they do this stupid thing. I mean, now it's all done, so you can literally just watch it entirely. But if you're watching it as it was coming out, it's like, oh, this is season 5, part 1 out of part 6, and then there's gonna be 2 movies, and they won't translate. Just stupid shit like this. But now it's finished, so it's yeah.
Maybe someday I'll try
Titans
it.
win in the end, or are the Titans an allegory for the conquest and they can be controlled? Woo! No, it's very good because like I am so content pilled eternally. My letterbox, I think, has like over 2,000 movie reviews at this point, and show reviews. But like I'm watching this, I'm like, I have no idea where this is gonna go, because it's like big dudes breaking into a society of humans that is very caste based, that lives inside of like a place that is protected by big walls. And then there's different like militaries, and where the fuck, it's like post-apocalyptic or whatever, and where the fuck did the big humans come from, and why do they just eat humans for pleasure? Like, it's actually like so niche that like there's no, like, you cannot, like, you can usually predict the way a film or a show is gonna go. either when you're very brilliant like me, or when you've watched a lot of shows also like me. So I'm a double entendre. But no, jokes aside, like it's usually like just reference points, right? You watch so many things, you kind of see a cliche or a recurring pattern, and then you know how it's gonna go. Blah blah blah. But here, like, what patterns? What patterns? Giants fighting children for Wall City. Like, there's no patterns at all. It's actually fun. I have no idea where it's gonna go.
I was going to say, wait, have you finished it, Hugo? You have?
No, I'm on episode 11 or something in the beginning.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. Okay, good. I was about to. I got the vibe that you. Okay, I'm not going to say anything that even would grace a spoiler, but be very careful and don't read comments. People are going to try to fucking spoil it for you. Anybody who asks you, don't look at it. But what was I gonna? Say. Yeah, when I was on my honeymoon with my wife.
Old man.
We were waiting for a, what's it called? A barge. What is it called?
A ferry?
Ferry, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. We were waiting for a ferry, and there was this woman who was maybe in her 50s, in her mid-50s, and she was watching Attack on Titan, early season, Attack on Titan, on her phone, and she was so engaged. And I positioned myself so I'd be like the creep above her, behind her shoulder, so I could see where she is in the show.
Drops of spoiler.
No. I didn't give any spoilers, but I was just looking over and I was like, "Ooh, oh my gosh, she has no idea what's coming."
Freaks, all of you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the D program. We start discussing Nicolas Cage movies after the banter, which you get to miss out on. But today we are doing a monitoring the situation update through my very nasally sniffles. I'm super clogged, so I'm sorry if that tickles your ear in the wrong way. But hey, the bombs be dropping, so we have to kind of get on top of all this and give you the hot piping news or analysis.
The slop fresh out of the extruder, straight into your mouth.
Exactly right. Okay. Before we start, of course, thank you to everybody that supports us on the Patreon. Anybody who buys our merch, anybody who checks our stuff out and engages with it, we love you and appreciate you. Our patrons get plenty of fantastic perks. They get access to the Discord. They get extra episodes. They get bonus episodes. They get access directly to us at certain tiers for monthly discussions and much more. It's very worth your money. So do check it out. That being said, let's start. Today we're going to cover the Iran situation generally, but I do need to give the addendum. Now, this is a very quickly evolving situation. Information changes very quickly, so this could be outdated, like not too far from now, but that's not the point of this. The point is to give you the tools for analysis to see what is happening, why it's happening, what the potential future could look like. Or if you really would like a view into the future, let's say, to see what could possibly happen. There is a white paper published by the Brookings Institute, which is titled "Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Towards Iran." And this was published in June of 2009, and it has a play-for-play for every single thing the Americans have done since to try to basically destabilize Iran, and for what ends and what purposes. And they have, by the way, it's very well written, right? So, and like, I'm just going to give you a few chapter headers just so you get the vibes. It starts with dissuading Tehran, the diplomatic option, and offer Iran should interviews, persuasion. Tempting Tehran with engagement, the engagement option. Disarming Tehran, the military options. Going all the way with invasion, the Osirak option, so airstrikes. Leave it to Bibi, allowing or encouraging an Israeli military strike. And then toppling Tehran, regime change. The Velvet Revolution, supporting a popular uprising. Inspiring an insurgency, supporting Iranian minority and opposition groups. The coup, supporting a military move against the regime, and then deterring Tehran. This is the finalist containment, and then accepting the unacceptable containment. That's how they kind of finish it off with various conclusions subsequently. And I'm not kidding when I tell you literally everything, like to the letter, everything that was done, all the talking points, all the justifications, all the methods of bringing it about are mentioned in this Brookings Institute article. And there are white paper. And there are similar white papers for China, for Russia, for Venezuela, for Cuba. It's out in the open. Because they don't really care to try to hide it. And these white papers are basically the skeleton of what then gets formed into like these very quick few-page summaries that are presented to congressmen and members of Senate and members of government in the states, who then just rubber stamp it essentially. And then there's these armies of lawyers that codify it into law and policy and so on and so forth, so that it actually gets delivered. So this is like a very clear view into how the United States drums up, creates, and then subsequently implements its foreign policy directives and towards what ends. And what's most interesting is it's almost always exclusively these sort of institutions, highly funded by the private sector, usually the military-industrial complex and other, like, BlackRock equivalents, for the ends of, reading natural resources, maintaining access to financial markets, blah, 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 the typical imperialist playbook. So that's the little addendum that I want to give you. You should genuinely check it out. But before you check that out, you should listen to this episode, because we need to give you the necessary tools to analyze the bullshit that they say. And that's where I'm going to hand it off to my beautiful baby boy, JT.
That's me.
Also, listening is better than reading. Never read, only listen, and only after listening.
Okay, I can't get behind this.
Hakeem logs off.
Because he works for Big Book. Okay,
that's true.
He's paid by Big Book. Big Book.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna bust on some paper. Oh my god! I wish I worked for Big Book. I wish. Please, JT, tell us about a short history of modern Iran and your bit.
I would love to. Iran. A land of contradictions, home to the mysteries.
I didn't run. What the fuck do you mean? You ran. Oh,
Shut up.
Sorry.
Home to the mysteries that have long intrigued the sunburned masses of the West. To understand Iran, I think we should probably start with the political economy of the early 20th century and the relationship between... Whoa! You're just on a roll today, aren't you, buddy? Please, you got any more? You got any more?
Eyebrows. Dude, we started this show with stereotypes about Iranians. I think it's like episode 3 of the deprogram. We were like, I drive white Mercedes and I use Gucci Guilty. Like, so it's, we've been proven right that they are giga chads,
Fair enough. I rescind my criticism of your jokes. Okay. Political economy, right. Back to the early 20th century, relationship between Iranian labor, Iranian resources, and, of course, foreign capital. So...
Ooh.
By the 1950s, Iran's oil sector, this is its single most important source of national wealth, was dominated by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a British firm that controlled extraction, refining, and export. As you can probably guess, the profits of this company flowed overwhelmingly to Britain, while Iranian workers and the Iranian state received only a fraction of the value produced by their own natural resources. Never seen this pattern before.
Your little white Mercedes, not the
white Mercedes. Fun fact, though, this company, which used to be called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, has its roots all the way back in 1901, when the Iranian monarchy granted a British investor named William Darcy basically unlimited rights to explore and extract oil in the country in exchange for minor royalties to the royalty. Anyway, fast forward back to the 50s, and the Anglo Oil Company had become one of the most profitable ventures across the entire British Empire, and the situation had created what nerds would describe as a national bourgeois movement in Iran. In 1951, Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, leading a coalition known as the National Front, attempted to reclaim Iranian economic sovereignty from the pale and squishy hands of the British. His government moved to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, and this act was enormously popular among the Iranian population because it represented a direct challenge to foreign control over the country's most valuable resource. And then the Iranian parliament voted to nationalize oil in 1951. For Britain and its financial interests, though, this was an existential threat. Oil revenues from Iran were a major pillar of British post-war economic recovery. Allowing a country on the periphery to successfully nationalize its resources would also set a precedent that other colonized or semi-colonized nations might follow. In other words, good heavens, the colonies are conspiring. Now, around this time, the Iranian Communist Party, known as the Tudeh Party, initially treated Mossadegh with skepticism. From a strict class perspective, Mossadegh represented the national bourgeoisie rather than the working class, but the political situation on the ground forced a strategic reassessment, let's say. And as the confrontation with foreign powers intensified and the monarchy moved to undermine the nationalist government, the Tudeh Party eventually provided much of the grassroots street mobilization that sustained the nationalization movement. And of course, this is where we get the common expression, the enemy of my enemy may not be my friend, but at least he's not British. So there you go. The confrontation culminated in Operation Ajax in 1953. The CIA and MI6 orchestrated a coup to remove Mossadegh and restore the authority of the Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. This was your bread and butter imperialist intervention. The purpose, as always, and regardless of how the West tried to sell it, was not democracy or stability, but to ensure that Iranian oil remained accessible to Western capital and that Iran did not drift onto an independent development path or, God forbid, into the Soviet sphere of influence.
Had to make sure that the nose to GDP ratio increases because that motherfucker was carrying, holy shit.
He was packing.
I was packing. I wonder whether there is direct correlation between nose size and cock size, because if there is.
Doctor?
Holy shit.
Inversely, when it comes to his...
Oh my God. Anyway, after the coup, the Shah ruled as a classic comprador figure. This is a local ruler whose political survival depended on facilitating foreign economic domination. So pick your favorite term there. You know, a lapdog, sellout, a traitor. All those terms were used, and of course neither the Shah nor the British cared. Iran's economy was reorganized around exporting raw materials, primarily oil, while importing finished industrial goods and weapons from Western countries. So the state became deeply integrated into the global capitalist system in a dependent position. Then, in 1963, the Shah launched what he called the White Revolution. This was a series of top-down reforms designed to modernize Iran and accelerate capitalist development. Land reform broke up large estates, and here you might think, oh, land reform, yay, I know that one. But instead of empowering peasants, it produced a massive population of landless rural migrants. So, not yay. Millions of former peasants moved into urban areas, especially cities like Tehran, where they formed a rapidly expanding urban proletariat and semi-proletarian population. And here, the eagle-eyed British working class spotted something. So, one guy said to another, oh, it's a bit like Industrial Revolution here, isn't it? Bit like what they done to us, right? And his buddy said back to him, yeah, but those Iranian types, they're brown, innit? So, it don't really matter. Yeah. And thus the British working class returned to their beans on toast and thought no more of the subject. This period also saw the creation of the Shah's secret police, Savak, which was trained and supported in part by foreign intelligence agencies, including Israel's Mossad.
Oh, drum roll.
Who could have guessed?
Great name, though. Really good name, though. Like, they're always better than us at names. Savak.
What, Savak? Yeah, that's really cool. It's hard.
Fuck you. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
We only ever won with Stasi, like all the other ones.
Yeah, the rest are kind of cringe.
Okay, whatever. Stasi is like, I want to be arrested by you and tied up. Continue, please.
But yes, this really cool organization became notorious for repressing Marxists and trade unionists and Islamist opposition groups. And interestingly, this era also included a strategic alliance between Iran and Israel. Both countries were non-Arab states aligned with Western geopolitical interests in the region. And under what was sometimes called the Periphery Doctrine, they cooperated economically and militarily. Iran supplied Israel with oil, and we began to see more significant intelligence cooperation between the two governments. But by the 1970s, contradictions within Iranian society had intensified pretty dramatically. The Shah's modernization project had, unsurprisingly, enriched just a tiny handful of elites while displacing traditional social classes and creating enormous inequality. This sparked opposition movements, which emerged from several distinct social groups. One important force was the bazaar merchant class, often described as the traditional petite bourgeoisie. These merchants felt squeezed between state-led industrialization and the influx of Western multinational corporations. Another decisive force was the industrial working class, especially oil workers. And while Marxist organizations had deep roots among students and intellectuals, it was the mass strikes of oil workers in 1978 that delivered the decisive blow against the monarchy. When oil production stopped, the state lost both revenue and political leverage. At the same time, millions of people living in urban shanty towns, often migrants displaced by failed land reforms, formed a population known as the dispossessed. This population represented a kind of declassed social layer, so they were no longer peasants, but not fully integrated into the industrial working class either.
Mustafi is what he's referring to for those who have read Karamanyan's work.
Yeah, I can't say that word, so I was just, fuck it, dispossessed. But they became some of the most militant street supporters of revolutionary movements, and all of these forces converged during the 1979 revolution. Now, the revolution was not a unified ideological project, right? This was a temporary united front consisting of Marxists, Islamists, workers, students, bazaar merchants, the urban poor, and their shared goal was the overthrow of the monarchy and the end of foreign domination. Predictably, after the revolution, the coalition fractured. Political power ultimately consolidated under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini and the emerging Islamic Republic. So, from a geopolitical perspective, the revolution fundamentally transformed Iran's position in the world system. Before 1979, Iran functioned as a Western proxy state and a regional enforcer of Western interests. Do you have something, Hakeem? Oh, good.
He just gets very aggressive when he listens
Iran,
to stories about
Iran.
Persians. Like, fucking Persians, fucking motherfucking foaming at mouth. Like,
Yeah.
It's okay. It's only when I hear what's it called, the Diaspora One talk. Baba, we avoid. We
don't get me
avoid.
started. Don't get me started. I love the newest propaganda piece of the football players. They didn't want to sing the anthem, and that we must protect them. Here are like $100 million in like Australian citizenships, and this is definitely not like the most cliche depiction of a psyop / propaganda piece that I've ever seen in my life. Like, holy mother of God. Sorry for... Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, my God. It's like I hate... I don't know if it's because I am in this job that I do this and I look at this all the time, or if everybody else is also noticing this. And I hope everybody else is also noticing this, because it's like, come on, they're not even good anymore.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Anyway, after the revolution, Iran became an independent regional power pursuing its own strategic agenda. It began building networks of allied movements and militias across the region, sometimes referred to collectively as the Axis of Resistance. And these groups function as asymmetric tools to counter the overwhelmingly conventional military dominance of the United States and its allies. Once Iran stopped acting as a Western gendarme, it was immediately subjected to economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and military containment. So, from our perspective, a Marxist perspective, this shift marked Iran's transition from a comprador dependency into a state pursuing a more autonomous, though still internally contradictory, development path. So there you go, there's a little history.
Beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Moving into, I guess, or skipping over some history, I want to, because we'll get bogged down, and you've also heard history 100 times, so we'll get bogged down in the weeds of everything subsequently. So I want to kind of focus on what affected Iran so that the situation got to where it is today, right?
Israel. Did I guess
exactly right. This is
I didn't even look at the script.
a short history of the aggression by Israel and the United States, to be more specific, but also Israel against Iran, the sanctions that have affected the Iranian economy, and then subsequently the nuclear deal and what happened with that. So we'll begin with a very, very short overview. I guess literally 2 sentences, because you don't need more than that. The United States and Israel, in more aggressive posturing, have always tried to destabilize the Iranian government. They've done this through several ways. The most common one is sabotage, military or economic or scientific sabotage. Stuxnet, the worm that they introduced into some of the computer systems of research institutions, particularly nuclear centers, was one of them. The other one was target assassinations of scientists and whatnot. But the much bigger view of this is sanctions, and you can't really separate Israel and the U.S. because they're very intertwined when it comes to pushing for sanctions, right? It is American interest to impose these sanctions, but there's a lot of AIPAC and other Israeli-funded money that goes into basically drumming up or supporting or writing up these sanction proposals. We'll begin with the very first one, which was Executive Order 12170, signed by President Carter at the time, I believe, in 1979, so this was right after the revolution, where he immobilized or froze $12 billion worth of Iranian assets. Now, prior to 1979, Iran was a Western client state. It was a comprador state. As a result of this, of course, it was natural for them to put all their assets in Western banks, particularly American banks. They served the United States. Why wouldn't they? The second that kind of goes the other way, though, when the government changes and they're no longer so friendly to the states, of course, the Americans have full access. They know what assets there are, what form they are, and where they're kept, so they can freeze them because they're kept on American shores, of course. That's kind of one of the biggest drives for de-dollarization, and also for moving assets or diversifying asset portfolios away from European and American banks, because this is a pattern of American foreign policy, or Western, just American aligned foreign policy. If you don't play ball, then we're gonna freeze anything that you have in our banks. We don't respect the free market. We don't respect, any of this. Yeah, you get what I'm trying to say. Anyways, That was the very first one. Shortly afterwards, Iran was designated as a state sponsor of terrorism, and as a result of this, the United States banned the export of all dual-use technologies. Now, dual-use is such a loaded term because dual-use can be like nuclear, like fissile material, but it can also be like carbon. Right, you can like a car or like steel can be technically a dual use, but the vast majority of steel use is it's a very easy way of making it palatable to a population, your domestic population, while you're sanctioning this third world poor country, while at the same time punishing them for trying to import anything, basically. But they banned the export of dual-use technologies, and this basically slowed down Iran's industrialization and continued growth, particularly in construction sectors, but just in general. Then subsequently, this was followed by the Iran and Libya Sanctions Act, which targeted any firm that invested over $20 million in Iranian oil. $20 million is chump change when it comes to oil. I don't know if you guys know how much a pumping station is worth. It is hundreds of millions. Just a single, the thing that you see that spins, right? The meme, the shit that actually takes it out of the ground.
3-4, yeah.
Yeah, it's hundreds of millions to invest in a foreign country to get these going. So it's 20 million basically makes it impossible for anybody to invest in Iran, and at the time also in Libya. And then also subsequently, the US began trying to close up any sort of loopholes around their sanctions, right? That could happen legally, by the way. These aren't like this is not the Iranians trying to be smart, right? This is just like, okay, well, Americans won't allow us to pass our transactions through American banking systems, so let's use like a European bank or some other kind of bank to do it. These are called U-turn transactions. I'll get to them in a second, but the US began banning this sort of U-turn transaction, which bans or cuts off Iran from the global financial nerve system, you could say. It forces Iran into very deep unequal exchange bartering, basically, where they have to sell their oil for very cheap, way under its actual market value, just so that they can have some sort of trade. Like, you have to incentivize somebody to trading. In this case, it can only be in kind, meaning we'll send you this much oil and you send us this much grain or whatever it is, right? They did the same thing with Iraq, by the way, with the food for oil program, which is disgusting, but that's a discussion for another day. A U-turn transaction, specifically, it's a legal loophole that allows Iranian banks to move money through the global financial system using dollars, but as long as that transaction turned around basically within a non-Iranian and non-US bank, meaning a German or an Algerian or a Russian bank or whatever else. Now, if with these transactions being banned, this basically means that the United States would limit or sanction banks that would facilitate these transactions. So basically, it means like if you trade with Iran, you're going to get punished. This is the same thing they do with Cuba, by the way. Subsequently, another series of sanctions came in. Now we're like up to 2011. This is like the secondary sanctions, basically, where it's not like primary core economic limitations that they try to set. They're trying to basically just close all the valves on Iran. The first of which is intended to basically punish any nation that traded with Iran, and that was with the SWIFT disconnection, which began in 2012. This formally expelled all Iranian banks from the SWIFT system and made legal international trade basically impossible. Now, right for us in the current like emergence of the multipolar world, that's not that big of a deal because now there's like 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 other systems that you can use, and the biggest one is the Chinese one, the CIPS system. But the Russians have one, the Iranians have developed their own, I believe the Indians also have one. But if you were to go back 15 years, fuck it, even 10 years, you just had SWIFT. Look, outside of SWIFT, there's fucking nothing, right? So this, in 2012, this was a death sentence, basically. This was followed by the Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Accountability and Divestment Act. So the Americans are for BDS, but not against the one entity where it matters. Anyways, so this was basically targeting the entire energy value chain, specifically regarding oil. It sanctioned any firm selling refined petroleum to Iran. Now, why does this matter? Iran has massive crude oil reserves, but its refining capacity is much lower than the amount of oil that it has. The reason is because of colonial underdevelopment first, and subsequently these previous sanctions that prevented Iran from developing the industrial capacity and base to increase their refining. The capacity for them to refine their own oil. This is something that the Chinese are trying to help them with currently. But again, this is still like 2012. If you can't get refined petroleum, then you can't move along your crude oil, your unrefined crude, right? As a result of this, you basically, this is a starvation tactic. This is basically, you won't be able to trade at all. And the one thing that allows you to trade your oil, which is having a bit of refined oil to kind of like mix with your current, it's more complex. I'm not going to get into the details of how fucking oil exports work, but basically it means you can't export oil. That's the point of that sanction. Subsequently, there was another one, Section 1245 of the, what's it called? The Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Act, which was considered to be like the nuclear option of destroying Iranian economic health. And that was against the Central Bank of Iran. And it basically forced foreign banks to choose either you trade with Iran or you trade with the United States. Right. If you have any ongoing transactions with the Iranian central bank, which is what the Iranian state would use, then you cannot trade with any American bank, period. Right. And this basically means that nobody effectively will even want to, like, if you wanted to, I mean, maybe you don't know this, JT or Hugo, you haven't tried to do it probably. If you want to order, let's say, a carpet from Iran, or if you want to get, I don't know, some like handwork or some shit like this, right? Some artwork, whatever the fuck, from Iran, you legally cannot do it because no bank will process that transaction because it will eventually hit an Iranian bank or the Central Bank of Iran, and then immediately that means that the entity that processed it, like your local fucking downtown bank service, will then be immediately sanctioned by the American government. Wow. And then they won't be able to, like, it's to that level. So that's why you see this, like, you cannot order anything from Iran the way that you can, for example. And this also extends for Syria, for Sudan, and a bunch of other countries, DPRK and Iraq, Iraq was on the list, and a bunch of other, Cuba as well. Some of these countries are no longer on the list, but funnily enough, if you look at the terms and service of any software that you use, it says that you on like your honor, you say you agree that this service that you're using or software you're using does not have any connections, not being used in or for these countries. And it says Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, DPRK, Cuba, Sudan, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
and this is kind of
almost every like software company that I worked for, especially like software that can be used for quote unquote, different ministries of defense and so on. But not even like for commercial use. Like every single software adjacent or like specifically cloud adjacent software companies I worked for, and I worked for a few back in my evil Yugopnik days. In the orientation week, for those of you who are too young, like when you start working in a corporation, you have like either an orientation week or an orientation month if they're very serious. There would always be like at least 3 to 4 hours worth of material just specifically explaining about how you like immediately need to tell your supervisor that you at any point in your life economically interacted with, and then there's a list of quote-unquote sanctioned countries, and if you don't, we will fuck you up the ass if we ever find out. Like it is a very proactive system where it's even for an employee having had any interactions with a sanctioned state, while working on any sort of software is like absurdly forbidden. So like just to add on from like personal experience, but like my experience is irrelevant, like experience of like millions of people. When you hear like these conversations specifically about sanctions, and Hakeem has lived through sanctions, I've lived through sanctions, but like contextualizing
JT will live through sanctions.
Oh, come on, motherfuckers. but contextualizing it like for 2020, 2020s, let's say, oh my God, we live in the 20s. To contextualize it, like, because a lot of people are like, okay, sanctions, blah, 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 but come on, 21st century, like, come on, we live in the digital space. Everything, you can sneak
freedom of information.
You can sneak through everything to an extent. Nah, they thought of everything. Like, they thought of almost everything. Sure, there are like, quote unquote, illegal channels, usually organized crime, blah, 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 that in this case plays an interesting role where sometimes it can even help out, like, domestically. But they did think of everything. And at some point in your life, you will have an interaction. No matter how far removed you are from a sanctioned state, you will have an interaction with either a commodity or a service or whatever, where they unironically ask you a question on whether you have any relations to a sanctioned country. And when you do have, like, refer back to this episode and to what you've been hearing from these two lovely gentlemen, because it's a machine that does not stop. It's a machine that even sometimes employs like thousands upon thousands of people in the country that is doing the sanctioning just for monitoring purposes. It's,
exactly right. It's scary.
It's insane. It's scary. It's very scary.
In case, by the way, somebody thought that my comment was ill-suited, Iraq was sanctioned by the United States. The Balkan area was sanctioned by the United States. JT and the United States will be sanctioned by the United States. It effectively is being sanctioned right now.
And in Iraq specifically, just because Hakeem is too modest, in Iraq specifically, the sanctions like literally killed like hundreds of thousands of children specifically, which is sometimes these things kill more than even bombs do. But
I don't know what to tell you. Go.
You're making me bleep.
Where have you
stop?
JT will give you the coordinates.
I have to individually drag the beep sound effect over the thing. Trim the front end because there's some silence. Lower the gain to minus 20. Okay, continue.
Okay, though.
Or just keep it and leave the States already, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, true.
We have good internet in other parts of the continent. I literally have the best internet out of both of you combined times 11. I have had an optic cable since I was 19. Sorry. Yeah.
All right, Habibi. I was giving you a various list of sanctions, and boy howdy, I believe, as you Americans say, that was a lot of sanctions. Well, after the choose Iran or choose trading with the States thing hit, the Iranian exports like dropped overnight below 50%, like a deep dip that they had. And that was followed by Executive Order 13871, which is sanctioning Iran's iron, steel, aluminum, and copper sectors. Now, why would this be important? This would be the reason that this is problematic for Iran is because these industries were the last, I guess you could say, strongholds or centers of the Iranian industrial workforce, right? They worked in state-sponsored iron, steel, aluminum, and copper forges or whatever they're called, right? Mm-hmm. Once these sectors were sanctioned and destroyed to an extent, the U.S. basically wanted to create this mass unemployment, hoping to turn the working class into this D-class, lumpen proletariat that would be too dissatisfied with the status quo to maintain the government as is, and then would eventually topple the government. This is an attempt to overthrow the government, basically. Of course, strangling the export revenue of state-owned oil sector. Or oil sectors, which is the primary form of any sort of fiscal income for Iran. The U.S. was trying to also force the Iranian state into this crisis of you can't import food, you can't maintain your industrialization, you can't keep people employed, and at the same time, nobody can even send money into Iran. There's very specific ways of remittances that you can do for people who live outside, but the vast majority of it is very difficult. The sums are capped, and you have to provide evidence that you're not doing it, sending it to an Iranian government. It's fucked. It's generally it's fucked. This was followed by the Executive Order 13599, which blocked all property of the Iranian government and financial institutions within U.S. jurisdiction. Now, that's a funny way of saying the U.S. can choose where this jurisdiction is, for all intents and purposes. So basically, this gives the Americans full right to block the usage of and then eventually seize anything that exists that belongs to the Iranian state anywhere in the world. They could create some stupid legal skeleton for it to make it legal, and everybody else will just kind of look the other way. And they did do this at various instances. And then this was followed by Executive Order 13622. And this, addendum of it was called the Iran Threat Reduction and Syrian Human Rights Act, which expanded this to all Iranian shipping, insurance, and the purchase of Iranian crude oil by anybody else. And then this was followed by another executive order, 13645, and this one prohibited transactions related to the Iranian rial. So even the currency was sanctioned. It could be nothing to do. It could be JT and I deciding to exchange sexual favors, and we're paying in the rial. The Americans would sanction us for this.
I remember in the orientation week thing, it literally said, "Have you ever owned or do you currently keep any Iranian currency?" Wow. Like, and you know how difficult it is to reach out to your local representative to get a pothole fixed? And yet there are points with sub-points that have grandchildren that have grandchildren worth of sub-points of very specifically regulated step-by-step, what the state or the police force or any individual private enterprise needs to do when it comes to upkeeping sanctions. But when it comes to you getting the fucking pothole fixed, you call a guy, he refers you to another guy, the 17th guy doesn't know who to refer to. Yeah, AA refers you to an AI agent, etc., etc. But when it comes to sanctions, it's like it's a well-oiled, like it makes like Soviet state management look like a joke. When it comes to managing sanctions, nothing can squeeze through. And we think it's impossible to manage something else.
That's a great point, and I'm harping a little bit on the sanctions point because I personally feel that this is the least well understood aspect of American foreign policy, because people think sanctions are just like, oh yeah, like now it will be a little bit more expensive. No, sanctions literally mean like, oh, you're not going to be able to import grain. Get fucked.
It's buying bread with cigarettes. That's what it finds.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. But yeah, this was subsequently followed by something called the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, which was an act that codified all existing sanctions against Iran into law. So this is meant to make them much more difficult to waive or remove subsequently in newer administrations through executive orders, like future executive orders or executive actions. Basically making these sanctions like a statute of U.S. law. So what does this signal like internationally? That they don't want any sort of flexible diplomacy with Iran. If you wanted to be diplomatic, you would not be doing this. Right? Yeah. And this is trying to kind of make sure that Iran's economic isolation was or remained a permanent, like structural reality. This was followed by the 2020 Banking Sanctions Act, which designated on top of the Central Bank of Iran, which is already sanctioned to shit, designated like little neighborhood banks even, 18 additional Iranian banks, under broad anti-terrorism authorities. Now, for those who don't know, anti-terrorism laws are basically like the white sheet or like the blank check that Western governments use to do whatever they want. If they put an anti-terrorist law on something, that just basically means that you don't have rights. You can it doesn't have rights. You can monitor it and surveil it as much as you want. Nobody gives. Yeah, you have license to kill, license to seize assets or people or what. You can do literally whatever you want. That's the point of the whatever. Yeah. It's like the old-timey anti-communist laws. They turn into but you get the point. This is basically the final, I guess, nail in the coffin, the financial excommunication of Iran, which basically made any legitimate international trade that could possibly happen absolutely impossible, right? The economy has to function solely on bartering. You cannot exchange currency in any way through these American-controlled channels, which the vast majority of them are, up until very recently. of course, because as you realize, the United States controls this clearinghouse of all international transactions, it basically means that there's a monopoly on the movement of any sort of capital value, whatever you want to call it. If a country is sanctioned, it's not just being punished, it's being removed, like forcibly removed from the global division of labor and access to capital, either expenditure or movement of capital. And this basically means that the economic misery that results is not the unintended side effect, like so many dumbass liberals seem to think. It is the intended outcome. I know I'm preaching to the choir on this, but I still think it needs to be said. If you destroy the productive base of a society, industry, energy, infrastructure, then what the United States is doing, it's seeking to decompose, for example, in this case, the Iranian working class into this declassed, desperate mass that would create conditions for either a regime collapse, because they can't keep hospitals running and schools running and all that kind of stuff, or a coerced reopening of the company, of the country. I mean, the country would become so desperate that they would acquiesce, right, by reopening themselves into foreign capital on terms favorable to the imperial core and detrimental to the domestic base. And this leads into the nuclear deal, which Hugo will beautifully deliver.
Mm-hmm.
With displeasure, because it is as insane as the sanctions are. So let's start from 2015. After years of crippling sanctions that Hakeem has mentioned, the Iranian state agreed to drastic constraints on its nuclear program, capping enrichment at 3.67%, 6767, dismantling 2/3 of its centrifuges, and submitting to the most intrusive monitoring in history of any state. By 2016, the Iranian compliance was verified by international verification mechanisms. The US and the EU supposedly lifted nuclear-related sanctions. They felt slight economic relief, but in 2018, the Trump administration unilaterally withdrew from the deal, reimposing all previously set up mechanisms of sanctioning. By 2019, following a year of quote-unquote strategic patience, hoping for European assistance, Iran began exceeding enrichment caps and limiting IAEA access. Despite intermittent talks to revive the deal, no agreement was reached. Sanctions were continuously applied, and Iran's nuclear activity accelerated as a response. The failure of the talks just proves that the U.S. objective was never really a negotiated solution, but the continued containment of a non-aligned nation. The JCPOA served its purpose for the imperial core by temporarily stalling Iran's nuclear capabilities without requiring the U.S. to relinquish its role as the global economic hegemon. To say it in very plain terms, Iran thought it was doing real negotiations, while the other party at the table was looking at negotiations as simply postponing the inevitable, from their POV, clash. So, how did this clash, which we now see, begin? Well, in January of 2026, Iran faced widespread protests fueled by hyperinflation, severe infrastructure degradation, and the exhaustion of state social subsidies. Direct results, by the way, of over a decade of comprehensive sanctions. The imperialist strategy was basically to exacerbate domestic class contradictions. By intentionally impoverishing the working class through sanctions, the U.S. and its allies aimed to destabilize the regime and create a pretext for humanitarian or security intervention. Me and the boys contextualizing the weight of the sanctions does not in any way clear the weight off of the shoulders of the local administration, and sometimes either their incapability to adapt to said sanctions, which is a very difficult task, or the less difficult task of sometimes putting something in your pocket. But as you have learned from most of our coverage here at the D program, when we contextualize things against empire, it feels very reductive to point the finger at very real and existing local domestic problems when we're fighting against, to refer to the beginning of today's episode, literal titans. Okay? Just a small caveat addressing that we haven't mentioned them in a while. Liberals in the walls, right? Like this does not say that the other one does not exist. We're just talking about a much more, like it's like talking about AK-47 bullets when there's nukes dropping everywhere, right? So, by intentionally impoverishing the working class through sanctions, the U.S. and its allies aim to destabilize the regime and create a pretext for humanitarian or security intervention, to repeat myself, using digital infrastructure, social media, and proxy networks to ensure that demands for bread and dignity are redirected into demands for regime change that align with geopolitical goals of the U.S. and, of course, of Israel. Utilizing international media pipelines to frame the conflict in a way that legitimizes future military intervention, like framing a domestic protest as an existential struggle against tyranny that justifies humanitarian or strategic strikes. I think I've done it multiple times in this beautiful show of ours, but I don't think I've ever contextualized it specifically for British, French, German, or American, or let's even say Canadian viewership, on what the difference is between like you very fervently, sometimes even violently, disagreeing with how your government is running the system that you find yourself in, or even sometimes disagreeing with the system that you find yourself in, versus somebody utilizing your disagreement against that system to crush the sovereignty of your nation and then impose their own will over your people and over your way of life without ever having asked you in the first place. And the contrast, and I think let's, I don't know, use my American friends as an example, is sure, you dislike the Republicans, right? Oh, Republicans, very bad, very bad. I agree. Cheeto Man, very bad. He is unironically very bad. But how would Brazilians bombing your fucking cul-de-sac solve that problem? How would Brazilians coming and installing a Brazilian nationalist or Brazilian comprador class that just siphons more than any Republican could have ever imagined to siphon over to Rio de Janeiro solve the problem you had with Republicans? Are you fucking stupid? Are you daft? Well, if you cannot comprehend this allegory, then probably yes, you're daft. Please stop listening to the show like low-key, like you're lobotomized. Anyways, to finish up this like summary of the conflict up until now, combined of course with the previous conversation about nuclear adjacent sanctions. From February 6th to 25th, most of you listening to this remember this, the U.S. Treasury announced a rapid succession of sanctions targeting Iran's so-called shadow fleet and ballistic missile procurement networks, which is, basically fucking Israel did it, right? And by February 28th, Operation Epstein Fury began, where joint U.S.-Israeli forces launched nearly 900 strikes in the first 12 hours, targeting military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, government leadership, and like 200 schoolgirls. Supreme Leader Khamenei was assassinated. This was a textbook war of aggression launched in the middle of active, albeit stalled diplomatic negotiations. The assassination of the state's leadership was an explicit attempt to force a power vacuum and induce a collapse of the state structure from the top down.
Beautifully said, Hugo. And this kind of leads into something else. Why does the U.S. do this? What is the interest? In Arabic we say maslaha, right? Like, where is the who benefits, right, from this?
Yeah.
And there's a few points that I want to lay down. The first of which is something that a lot of people have begun to realize, but not enough, and it's this: the total centrality of China to U.S. foreign policy. Meaning, the vast majority of foreign policy moves that the United States does currently is almost entirely and exclusively aimed at limiting or containing China, right? Containing their economic development, their diplomatic connections, their relations in the various, the Shanghai Cooperation or in BRICS or in the Belt and Road Initiative, whatever else it might be. And that is the point of U.S. foreign policy as it currently stands. Number one. And number two, as a kind of B point, is Israel's interests, which we'll get to. For the United States, it's like this. By targeting Iran, the United States aims or hopes to disrupt one of the few major oil producers outside the direct influence of Western financial systems. Now, China's been very good with working on this. China knows that, for those who are unaware, China is a huge country with a huge population, and they have a lot of resources. One resource they do not have is oil. As a result of this, they have many vast strategic reserves that they've been building over many decades so that they would not be subject to shocks like the United States is being subject to now, despite them being a major producer and also supposedly having strategic reserves that, oopsie daisy, we realized, we forgot that we emptied them completely and we never refilled them. A little bit of hyperbole there, but the Chinese know that this is a weak point for them. As a result of this, they've kind of worked with us. They've created these convenient connections and diplomatic ties and whatnot with many oil-rich nations for this mutual win-win cooperation, so that they would not be kind of shut out of the access, I guess, to global oil. The United States was hoping by targeting Iran to disrupt one of the major sources for China. Iran serves kind of as a strategic buffer for their own reserves, because Iran provides cheap and friendly oil, which allows Beijing to basically fuel its industrial output, and it bypasses entirely the Western price-setting mechanisms through OPEC and a bunch of other institutions. This means that, or this conflict currently that's going on, forces an upward pressure, of course, on all sorts of energy prices, specifically of oil that we've seen now. I think prior to the war, it was like $68 about a barrel, and as of time of recording, it's like $125. So it has effectively doubled. Any small dips you see are strategic release of reserves, oil reserves that various Western countries have, particularly the States, but that only lasts like 1 or 2 or 3 weeks maximum, right? Japan's already dipping into their strategic reserve, which only lasts for 250 days, and Japan has built their reserve over, I think, since the 70s, I think. So like this is crisis level stuff. If this continues, the reverberations will be catastrophic in good and bad ways. We'll get to that. But anyways, because the price of oil goes up through closing the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. subsequently also creates an economic shock that it impacts itself, obviously, but also this disproportionately impacts the Chinese manufacturing sector, because a larger proportion of oil that's used by China comes out of the Strait of Hormuz compared to oil that goes, for example, to Europe or the United States, specifically the United States. I think the United States is like 20%. For China, it's close to 50%, right? Wow. So this is a much more significant limitation on them. The Chinese aren't idiots, though, and they have connections with Iran. There are pipelines to Iran as well that are being currently built, and some historic pipelines that are already built, so on and so forth. So it's not like China's being shut out of Iranian oil right now. But this is kind of like a potential point of escalation in this conflict. The idea is that the shock that disproportionately impacts China, and particularly their manufacturing sector, is supposed to kind of force China into this, or temporarily at least, into a dependency on U.S.-controlled markets and energy routes where the United States will have the upper hand again. That will not happen, but that's one of the things that they would like to do. When it comes to BRICS, Iran is the latest inclusion, or one of the latest inclusions into BRICS, and its attempts to trade oil in yuan, for example, or other local currencies, directly challenge the status of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency, specifically in relation to petrodollars, right? Or as with having oil as a backing for the U.S. dollar. The combined Epstein War, the U.S.-Israeli war, is meant to be kind of like an existential push to prevent this solidification of a more independent, let's say, economic bloc, meaning BRICS. By targeting and attempting to destroy the quote-unquote weakest link, that being Iran, the U.S. hopes to kind of either demonstrate an inability of BRICS to provide security or some nonsense like this, or much more importantly, it's to kind of hamper the BRICS, the Belt and Road Initiative. We talked about this extensively in literally the episode before this, so I highly recommend that you go and listen to that one, because we go into the geopolitics of all of this. Particularly in regards to Iran, but in many other nations around the world and geographic areas. But the Belt and Road Initiative, just to summarize, is China's like grand project to bypass U.S. both maritime dominance by instead creating land-based routes that the Americans can access, including integrated supply chains across Central Asia, West Asia, and so on and so forth. And Iran is the geographic bridge between China, the land-based basically belt part of this, and the maritime road that's being developed, meaning all these pipelines and commodity chains and transport networks will pass through Central Asia, through Iran, and then emerge out of Iran back into the water to bypass any potential choke points that the Americans can cause, for example, in the Strait of Malacca. That's one of the examples that I can give. By turning Iran to a war zone, the U.S. hopes to disrupt the connectivity and viability of these projects. Of course, they will not be able to, but that's a hope that the Americans have. All these infrastructure projects, these railways and pipelines that are intended to link China to the Mediterranean, for example, and into the Arabian Sea and outwards, are stalled by this war, both physically and economically. Now, this is something that will just get picked up right again, like it has in every other location that the United States has threatened, because the Americans don't seem to think more than like 2 weeks ahead. They've clearly mentioned this. They're like, oh, well, this war is supposed to only last for like 2 weeks. For just to be safe, we're going to move enough munitions for like 4 weeks of war into the area. I'm like, what the The incompetence of the Americans has been exceedingly beautiful to see, or arrogance, I guess, is a better term to use. Now, what is that's kind of like an overview of the American interest to this. There's so much more. Listen to the previous episode that we did. It's 2.5 hours worth of like deep analysis on specific infrastructure projects and how the United States tries to like put hurdles in the way or break them down. It's one of our best works, I would say. Anyways, what is Israel's role in all this? First of all, Israel is the imperialist outpost. That's the structural role that it has. Israel is not a sovereign entity acting independently. It is an integral, subsidized extension of Western and specifically U.S. imperial power and presence of capital. Israel serves as a high-tech military, intelligence, and industrial hub that's meant to secure Western control over West Asian, first of all, energy resources and also trade routes, but also to maintain managed instability in the region, right? Because that means all these areas are then easy to exploit. This incredibly resource-rich area is easy to exploit. By neutralizing Iran, Israel's hope is trying to fulfill, or attempting to neutralize Iran, you understand what I mean? Israel's trying to fill its functional role for its, imperialist or imperial sponsors to prevent any regional power, independent regional power, from achieving the military or economic autonomy that could challenge Western hegemony in West Asia. Quote-unquote, disarming Iran is not about creating safety, but about ensuring that no other country or state in the region can act as a pole of resistance to imperial dictates. And of course, a core Israeli interest otherwise is preventing any strategic link between West Asian energy and the manufacturing capacity of China via the Belt and Road Initiative. They say as much in their white papers. Please read what the shit that they say. If Iran was allowed or were allowed to integrate into a stable, non-Western-led economic bloc, then the geopolitical value of Israel preventing just that would diminish. Israel would lose its value as a little, unsinkable, what's it called?
Aircraft carrier.
Aircraft carrier. That's its whole point, to be a fucking military base.
And as a result of that, also there's the distraction mechanism for Israel domestically. The Israeli ruling class faces its own, I guess, crisis of legitimacy. I mean, they are illegitimate in every form, but all of Israel is. But specifically for their own people who believe in the nation project idea of Israel, the Israeli ruling class has its own crisis of legitimacy, has to deal with economic instability, internal political fragmentation, and of course the social costs and other costs of the genocide in Gaza and the West Bank. It's a deeply fractured society. Even before all the stuff that was happening in Palestine, I'm talking like 2020. The situation was not stable in Israel for them between their own political factions. I mean, to the point that
it's impossible for an apartheid state to be stable. That's the entire meme. Yeah, even for the guys doing the apartheid. Exactly. That's why it's such an inefficient, imbecilic system. Not only immoral, but also just completely like a very stupid way to run society. Just stupid.
No, you're absolutely right.
Stupid as fuck.
An interesting, gentle Marxist voice in the wall who's hearing this, but what is all this support that Israel seems to exert a greater effect on American politics than what you would imagine for what would be basically an American vassal imperial state, right? and that's very valid. But you need to realize that American support for Israel comes from various sources. One of which is what I mentioned: the foreign policy, imperial dynamic, where you want to maintain control over West Asia and want to maintain this managed instability, want to maintain access to shipping lanes and cheap West Asian natural resources and access to them, and maintain also a military presence in the form of a nation state. So it's not like a single base that can be bombed like in Qatar, for example, right? That's one side of it. That's the pragmatic side. Then you have the ideological side, which is of a different vibe. This is the Christian Zionist and AIPAC connection. There are various interest groups, not only just AIPAC, but like Christians United for Israel and so on and so forth, or the broader, I guess, Israel lobby, you can call it, which are channels by which specific segments of the ruling class and their ideological base exert influence within the capitalist state that is the United States. They do not operate against American national interest. They help define what those interests are. I hope that sentence makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The American political elite, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, support Israel because it aligns with a broader objective of maintaining hegemony in West Asia. If the lobby was promoting a policy actually detrimental to imperial interests, the state wouldn't and couldn't be bought, quote unquote, bought into such a position. This is kind of the idea that American politicians are, just like Looney Tunes, levels of naive, where they can just, have you wave $20 in front of their face, and then they, they're all the goodwill leaves their body, and then they just go over to the dark side. No, they know what they're doing, and it's not always as simple as, they've just been bought off. A lot of them are just bought off, yes, but a lot of them also understand that as AIPAC operates, let me word it like this. AIPAC functions through these elite networking and campaign financing mechanisms, and meanwhile you have Christian Zionism, which provides the foot soldiers, the actual, like, quote-unquote, popular support for AIPAC policies, right, on the ground, despite the fact that these people are not Jewish. These are supposedly Christians. They're not. Their ideology makes no sense, and their bastardization of the religion they claim to hold. But AIPAC and Christian Zionism links together to mobilize millions of voters to support these, like, quote-unquote, Israel First policies, and that makes it, in essence, political suicide for many mainstream politicians in certain parts of the United States to oppose the Israeli-U.S. partnership. That's one part of it, okay? It's a powerful tool for aligning, quote-unquote, working-class evangelical base support with the foreign policy goals of the corporate military capitalist elite that exists in the States. Now, the quote-unquote unconditional nature of American support for Israel is rooted in the material necessity of maintaining imperialist, I guess, hegemony in West Asia. I keep repeating myself on this because people don't understand. A lot of people are like, the Middle East, what is it? West Asia is literally the most, this is not just because I'm from here, right? It's the most important part of the planet. Not because of, some chauvinistic history and language and culture stuff. No, it's because of the crossroads of the world, of the old, quote-unquote, old world. Every single waterway, every single trade path, every single overland pipeline, every single thing worth a damn will have to somehow cross West Asia. Either it's through direct physical crossing because of geographic area, or because of the vast majority of resources that exist in this area that need to be moved, seized, processed, refined, or whatever else, right? That's why the United States has been in West Asia since the 50s and has not fucking left. In fact, they only invest more military bases, more arms. The only time this has shifted is in the past 15 years with the pivot to East Asia that Obama, for all intents and purposes, started. Is all of this clear so far?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it is. It is. I would just like to add like a slight caveat to the conversation when it comes to the relationship of Israel and the United States. Like, we can see historical precedent, and we can even see in current, Israeli foreign policy, a kind of moment in which, the colony does serve the interests of the core. And by serving the interests of the core, particular subcategories of interest groups can develop in the colony as well. But we have seen certain cases throughout history in which the colonial bourgeois, and not only the colonial bourgeois, sometimes even with, very comprador colonial proletariats, if you can even call somebody a proletarian, when they're fucking colonizers. I'm not going to go into that conversation. They can develop a strong enough, let's call it, ability to identify their own interests as sometimes separate to the core, and depending on the level of either political power or development of capital means, they can sometimes utilize either of those two and some other categories as well to make sure that even when it does not align perfectly to where the core of empire wants to go, they can potentially steer it. And sometimes they can even separate themselves from the core, as we've seen, for example, American colonizers separating themselves. I know it's a very different scenario, but still, to an extent, it's also similar. Like the American colonizers separating themselves from the British Empire, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
TLDR, what I'm trying to say is that, we very often focus on saying that, as you beautifully put, that, the American politicians, those who are not just bought for pennies, are not idiots, and they do very proudly serve American empire. But we should also not forget that in Tel Aviv, there are also not dumb motherfuckers that see beyond the ambitions of being the 51st state of the United States,
That's
who
true.
also try to both influence the core of empire and also steer their direction into some more glorious or whatever from their perspective colonial future. That's and if you think what I'm saying is fucking anti-Semitic or whatever, I would apply this to any fucking group of people on planet Earth. I just gave you the parallel with Americans.
You don't need to put the-
I don't
you
even know
the-
why I'm saying this. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fucking absurd.
But it's I really appreciate that point. And just to add a little bit more nuance in it, it's very common for more naive, I guess, Americans to say, oh, but like, how could serving Israel or doing all this, like, oh, $5 more billion to Israel, how could these be serving American interests? The interests of the American people and the American working class, and the interests of the American government, and who controls the American government, meaning the owners of capital, who are of all shades, are two different things, right? The interests of the military-industrial complex in the States, which is one of the largest lobbying groups, along with finance, along with blah, 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 all these people who have bought and sold the American government, their interests are fundamentally different, and in the vast majority of times diametrically opposed to the interests of a regular American person. And that's why it seems like it doesn't make sense. But that's because it's not meant to serve you.
Exactly.
That's one.
Yeah.
And number two, about just the Christian Zionist thing, I just realized a lot of people might not know what Christian Zionism is, who either haven't read about it or who aren't American. So for all my non-American audience, again, for me, this is so fucking like alien, right? So again, I'm from a country where Christianity is as old as Christianity is, basically, right? And we've
But
never
also,
had
we're
anything
both from
like
countries
this.
where we do have, like, let's be honest, like subsects of both of our respective ideologies. They're like the people that completely bastardize it and are fucking insane. But then
Exactly,
compared to these guys, they sound like the most normal motherfuckers on planet Earth. Like, they sound so rational. Please continue explaining it to our not American audience, because
If you're very interested in the nitty-gritty, like theological dispute of this, which I find endlessly fascinating, so I will recommend it. There is a fantastic lecture by a professor of biblical hermeneutics. His name is Ali Atai, Aliataie. Look him up, write Zionism, and then you'll see Zionism lecture, it'll come up. It's like 3 hours with, he's fantastic, so listen to that. There's some books I can recommend later as well if you're in. But the TLDR is like this. There are people who created an ideology basically 150 years ago, roughly, that believed that the covenant did not just go from the Jews to Christians. It's kind of shared. There's a covenant with the Jews, that God has a covenant with the Jews, and God has a covenant with the Christians. And the idea being is that the Jews are blessed only so long as you move them all to Israel.
Yeah.
And if they go back to the Holy Land, do you know what happens? Christ comes back. And what does Christ do? He kills half the Jews and converts the other half to Christianity. That's what Christian Zionists actually believe. And they support Israel because they want all the Jews of the world to be moved into Israel, so that they think they can kind of make it like a movie script where Christ will then come down and usher in the Armageddon and blah blah, and they will have their version of like the end of times. That is literally what tens of millions of American Christian Zionists believe. It is fucking insane. And there's reasons, by the way, why they ended up believing this. There's a reason why this particular branch of or form of Christianity was so widely adopted and spread, and that's a conversation for another day. Go listen to the lecture that I recommended. Anyways, my final little addendum on this is Israel functions as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. As we mentioned, it's a high-tech intelligence and military hub. It allows the United States to project power and check regional rivals like Iran without the constant need for direct troop deployments, because Israel can do its dirty work. Beyond its role, though, in strategic policing the area, for example, to protect the dollar-based energy order and disrupt the integration of Eurasian trade, as we just currently mentioned, this partnership facilitates massive militarized accumulation. What do I mean? Through the structural mechanism of U.S. military aid, American taxpayer wealth is cycled directly back into the pockets of the U.S. defense industry. I think this makes sense. Do I need to explain what... Yeah.
The defense industry is the Jews. Like, no joke. Like, if you wanna find like where does all the money go? And you're a dumbass fucking anti-Semitic cunt or whatever, or you're like, oh man, they're running it all from Baghdad, or they're running it from Beijing. Like, if you want,
it's
all the Iraqis, it's all the Serbs, it's all the Texans. Fucking dropping all three of our ethnicities or whatever. I love how his ethnicity is Texan. I'm sorry, JT, you're just getting fired for no reason. But like, if there is one, if there is one particular industry that's like the closest to almost every conspiracy theory you've heard in your life, where like all the money just goes there, no matter who's finding who, is the military-industrial complex. Like,
American military-industrial complex.
Yes. Exactly. If there's anybody that's close to like Beelzebub or whatever that lives on this plane, it's those motherfucking guys. It's surreal how close it is to like the lizard guys that want to sell you big tank to kill child. But then you're like, oh yeah, that's a lizard guy that wants to sell big tank to kill child. Like so, like there's two animals in you. Sorry for the slight rant. The dialectical materialist who sees the complexities of the world, and then like, oh yeah, there's just guys that are like, oh, if like everybody fights each other, money. And you're like, oh yeah, which again, still compatible with dialectical materialism, but usually we try to like be like, oh, it's more complex than that. Nah, there's some guys that are just like, like a big bomb, boom, money. I leave it back to you. I apologize.
How can we finesse the American government for the biggest payout and also to immiserate the American people? The like final sentence on this is, for Israel, unlike other regional governments or regimes that can be vulnerable to domestic upheaval, what I mean is, like, for example, I don't know if you've looked at the videos of all these U.S. bases around the Gulf, but in every single clip, the people of that country are celebrating that the U.S. base is getting hit. They hate the fact that the U.S. base is getting hit, but they can't say anything because they'll get in trouble with the local authorities, right? But every single one, right? In Bahrain, you're seeing them and they're dancing in the streets. In Qatar, the video, the guy is like, hit it. He's yelling. He's like,
And I'll cover this later, but like also the state also can't do anything either because they see what the people are doing.
In Kuwait, when the ghost of Kiev reemerged again and shot down these F-15s and F-35s out of the sky, the pilots that fell out and landed in Kuwait, they were grabbed. One of them landed in Iraq, and I think there were two of them that landed in Kuwait. In Kuwait, people drove out into the desert to look for them so they could beat them, and in in Iraq, it was a crowd of like 300 people that picked up this one not poor, he's a piece of shit, fuck him, this American pilot, and the comments were hilarious. There were people writing in the comments, like in Arabic to translate, there was like, oh, they're all going to take turns with him. You understand what they... My point being is that the local regimes. My point being is that the local regimes, regional governments, they are vulnerable. It's not that they might be. They are vulnerable to domestic upheavals by the presence of U.S. whatever in their countries. But conversely, the Zionist entity or the Zionist project is structurally and existentially dependent on Western sponsorship. It's a two-way street for them. So it ensures that it remains a permanently loyal partner in preserving the established order.
Yeah.
Israel will never become anti-imperialist, and that will never happen. Israel will never become Iran, is my point, or a DPRK or Cuba. That is a structural impossibility.
Physically impossible, yes. Hell, they will do their best to even sometimes proactively steer, even though, yes, they are a extension of U.S. empire. They will nonetheless, in order to preserve themselves as the extension of U.S. empire, need to ensure that the U.S. empire continues being empire and not just like a passive multipolar, just one of the other states type of deal. Which then collaborates with the conversation we had earlier about sometimes, I mean, the phrasing is wrong. Sometimes, like, it's against American interests to follow Israeli interests. No, it's not, because American interests currently are de facto defined as imperial interests. But if at some point American interests are not imperial, are not driven by the imperial imperative, then they would come to clash. But ironically, that's kind of the thing that we're all hoping for when it comes to the, let's say, organic dissolution of Israel, because then when there's no longer a need for an unsinkable aircraft carrier, it just sinks, right? It's just like unironically, organically sinks. Can we ever reach that point, though? And will there ever be an America that chooses not to be empire? Even saying it feels fucking insane and utopian. But maybe, hey, I am personally against American balkanization. Maybe like all the people of America wake up tomorrow and are like, nah, man, like, let's just be like cool with everyone, like just chill.
JT, walk us through the beautiful series of sites that have been.
As you wish. All right, let's move on to the current military escalation and what has actually been targeted. Obviously, like we said up front, this is an ongoing thing, and there's very much a fog of war situation going on. Neither side wants to accurately report their losses, so we will report what has been confirmed so far to the best of our ability, and you guys chip in if you've seen anything that I haven't. U.S. media is a little cagey about details sometimes. All right, so between late February and early March of this year, a series of coordinated strikes targeted U.S. military infrastructure and allied strategic assets across the Persian Gulf region. Unlike U.S. and Israeli strikes, which are often indiscriminate, or in the Israeli case, intentionally aimed at maximizing civilian casualties, Iran's targets were far less random. They were chosen specifically to degrade the integrated missile defense and logistical network that underpins U.S. military dominance in the region. The first major strike was on February 28th, when they hit an AN/FPS-132 early warning radar system in Qatar. This system is one of the most advanced long-range missile detection radars in existence. It can detect ballistic launches at distances of like 5,000 kilometers, and it's a critical component of the U.S. ballistic missile defense architecture. So destroying something this valuable is huge. It represents not just $1 billion material loss, but a major strategic degradation of the regional early warning network. Systems like this one are rare and complex, and replacing them isn't just like swapping out a few parts. It's a matter not of months even, but potentially years to get back up and running. So that's a big one. And then on the same day, Iran struck the U.S. Fifth Fleet naval support facilities in Bahrain, particularly at Jufair and Salman Port. Again, apologies on pronunciation. These facilities serve as the central logistics hub for U.S. naval operations in the Persian Gulf. The strike reportedly bonked warehouses, communication terminals, and radar domes. And the goal with this one was to reduce the U.S. Navy's ability to coordinate maritime surveillance and sustain its regional fleet operations. The next day, March 1st, they struck the U.S. Logistics and Command Center near Shuaiba Port in Kuwait. This installation played a major role in coordinating troop movements, supply chains, and in operational planning across the northern Gulf. By targeting this, Iran aimed to disrupt the logistical backbone that supports U.S. military deployments in the region. So we're starting to see a pattern here, right? Disrupt logistics and comms as much as possible. Then on March 2nd, a THAAD missile defense radar and battery infrastructure at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan was hit. THAAD systems are designed to intercept high-altitude ballistic missiles. Damaging them creates gaps in the missile defense network and reduces reaction time for Allied forces attempting to intercept incoming threats. Another early warning radar node in Dahal, Qatar, was struck on the same day. And now, taken together, these attacks were intended to create like a regional blind spot in the detection network that coordinates U.S. and Allied missile defense systems across the Gulf. On March 3rd, Iran shifted their attention to energy infrastructure. They hit oil storage and refining facilities in locations including Fujairah in the UAE. The damage reportedly reached tens of billions of dollars in infrastructure losses and production disruptions. And the strategic logic there was to weaponize energy flows, right? By threatening the physical infrastructure of oil export and refining, the strikes immediately affected global energy markets. Like oil and gas prices spiked, shipping routes were disrupted, and major regional aviation hubs, including Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha, were forced to suspend operations. Additional strikes on March 7th targeted fuel storage tanks at Kuwait International Airport and a government building belonging to the Public Institution for Social Security, which I love is the shortened version of that is PISS in Kuwait City.
Yeah.
Now, critics will be quick to point out that these sites were nominally civilian. And while that is partly correct, many of them were integrated into military logistics networks or were hosting U.S. military personnel. Civilian ports, airports, and industrial infrastructure across the Gulf frequently double as support facilities for U.S. military operations. They kind of just worm their way in there. Also on March 7th, an ANTPY-2 radar system associated with the THAAD missile defense network operated by the UAE was destroyed. This radar is crucial for tracking high-altitude ballistic threats, and its loss significantly reduces the UAE's ability to independently detect and intercept missile launches. So, taken all together, these strikes targeted three crucial pillars of U.S. regional power, and those are missile detection and defense, logistical coordination and command infrastructure, and energy and economic infrastructure tied to allied states. I will let you, Gopnik, get to the consequences of all this because they are significant and definitely worth talking about. But let me skip ahead to Israel because the United States was not the only one to lose some significant assets and get bonked quite thoroughly. All right. So let's take a look at a couple examples here. Israel's even more cagey about the details than the U.S. So again, this is just what we've been able to verify so far. On February 28th, the same day Iran launched its first strike on U.S. assets, they also targeted the industrial and port area of Haifa, including infrastructure near the oil and petrochemical complex. And the cost of this strike is, of course, undisclosed, but it's likely in the tens to hundreds of millions, depending on how badly each facility was damaged. Haifa is one of Israel's most important energy and maritime logistics hubs. The port and the surrounding petrochemical facilities support fuel storage, refining, naval logistics. Now, Haifa is not just a civilian port; it's a major energy node. So, like the surrounding area includes refineries and petrochemical pipelines that supply a pretty big share of Israel's fuel production and storage. Then after the initial attack at the end of February, Iran launched multiple follow-up waves over the next few days, over the first few days of March, this time targeting mostly electrical infrastructure. They hit stuff connected to Haifa Petrochemical and refinery complex again, which led to disruptions and operational downtime. They hit electrical infrastructure in northern Israel connected to industrial areas, which was intended to trigger cascade effects that would affect the port, refineries, desalination plants, industrial production, that sort of thing. They hit infrastructure near those same desalination plants in Israel and the Gulf region. And as far as we can tell, none of those plants have been destroyed. But if they do manage to destroy them, that would lead to immediate water shortages across Israel. So again, like with Iran's targeting of U.S. assets, we see a trend of targeting strategic infrastructure to make logistics more challenging and kind of kneecap the U.S. and Israeli response. That being said, Iran has also flexed a little bit and thrown some warning shots at Israel's population centers. Israel likes to claim that its missile defense system is invincible, but since the end of February, we have seen multiple Iranian strikes pierce the Iron Dome, some attacks even striking Tel Aviv itself. For example, a missile from their very first wave of retaliatory strikes hit a residential building in Tel Aviv. This was apparently intended to demoralize Israel and demonstrate that they're more vulnerable than they think. The strike does seem to have had the intended result, as the public immediately panicked about warning system delays and the effectiveness of missile defense alerts. And it's now clear that even heavily defended urban areas like Tel Aviv are vulnerable to saturation attacks. But zooming out, of the around 90 confirmed Iranian strikes recorded in the first 5 days of the escalation, 20 of them were in populated areas. So it's probably too early to say, but it seems like Iran has maybe finally had enough of Israel's constant threats and has decided to hit back and show a willingness to strike the heart of Israel directly, which is an interesting change. But beyond the warning attacks on Israel proper, what's really the most significant, I think, is how intentionally Iran has been targeting Haifa and Israel's energy and strategic infrastructure. The apartheid regime is on the ropes economically as it is, with settlers fleeing the region to go back to, Ohio or wherever it is they're originally from. And if these strikes manage to completely shut down the port or critical desalination plants, Israel is going to be in a really tough spot. And I don't think even the U.S. will be willing to foot the bill to rebuild everything.
So, what does that actually translate in when it comes to the direction, our beautiful little speck of dust in this beautiful little speck of dust of a galaxy means? Okay, let's start it out like this. For 3 decades, Washington sold this particular region a story. American hardware in your deserts equals safety in your cities, stability in your markets, and immunity from any serious attacks. That narrative did not die in a think tank paper or a Ben Shapiro-esque debate online. It died when Iranian missiles and drones walked straight through the most advanced air defense grid on Earth. Iranian strikes have heavily damaged the AN/FPS 132 early warning radar in Qatar, a system worth around $1.1 billion and described as the nerve center of the regional ballistic missile detection system. Satellite imagery and open reporting indicate that radar supporting THAAD batteries and Jordan's bases and sites in the UAE were also hit, degrading the radar eyes that make the whole layered defense architecture function. These are not symbolic assets. They are the core of the U.S. early warning and interception network that was supposed to shield Israel, Gulf monarchies, and forward-deployed U.S. forces from precisely this kind of barrage. The military embarrassment is not that some missiles got through or whatever. That was, of course, bound to happen. But that Tehran could successfully target, saturate, and at least temporarily neutralize high-value systems that were sold as untouchable. Coverage of the damage notes billions of dollars in U.S. losses and extensive disruption to command, control, and early warning systems across the Gulf, revealing a vulnerability that Washington's entire deterrence narrative depended on hiding. The imagery of, we've all seen the clips, smoking radar sites in Qatar, Jordan, and the UAE has more strategic impact than a decade of so-called U.S. guaranteed security. It visually communicates that American tech cannot guarantee you immunity as long as you, well, let's be honest, sell out, even against a sanctioned middle power state whose GDP is a rounding error compared to the U.S. The domestic public, already hostile to Israel and skeptical of U.S. motives, now officially see U.S. bases not as deterrents, but as magnets for missiles that further an instability that they're already too tired of. The Gulf monarchs are stuck between a rock and a hard place, literally in this case. They can't go against Iran because their public would crucify them, as we mentioned earlier, for allying with Israel, and they can't go against the proverbial West because their economic and military interests are far too tied to said West. So, the rational response for these governments is basically hedging their bets, an experienced gambler kind of mentality. Even before this war, Gulf states were diversifying arms purchases towards Russia, China, and secondary suppliers. The visible degradation of U.S. systems under fire strengthens now the case for quietly, if they're smart, and I hope they are, expanding non-Western defense contracts and relationships, from Chinese air defense to Russian electric warfare channels. At the political level, the old model, oil for security, which the Americans very proudly offered, but now, as we can see, could not live up to. Dollars for obedience, the same system that we now, with every rocket that lands on every target in the more obedient, let's call them Gulf states, is a fraying proposition. What replaces it, most likely, and this is why Americans, this is the eternal meme of Yankistanis and JT and Hakim, through many episodes have mentioned that LARP capitalism, until it plays against them, is that now, because of their inability to offer the same level of quality of service when it comes to support and safety and defense, what they will be replaced with is a more transactional, multi-vector, actual market system balancing, in which, Washington becomes not the main or even only, but one of the many security vendors amongst other systems and offers, East, West, etc., etc. But these are kind of the overarching perspectives when it comes to the actual, real, and important and impactful precedent being set by the Americans not living up to their promises of, hey, you give us base, we take care of everything. Now let's talk about my favorite middle-aged leftist fantasy slowly becoming a reality: de-dollarization. Analysts have documented how emerging market central banks have been adding record amounts of gold to their reserves, both as a hedge against currency risk and to keep assets beyond the reach of Western legal jurisdiction. The trend accelerated after Russia's reserves were frozen, and this conflict in particular provides another live demonstration that if your strategic autonomy conflicts with U.S. objectives, your dollar assets and payment channels can become pressure points overnight. Refer back to what Hakim said about, a past in which SWIFT systems were the only thing that existed. The current disruption, if in the gay Hormuz, incentivize get it gay because it's not Strait of Hormuz.
Stupid. I was like, what?
No, I did not. I did not get
Hormuz,
that.
I love how I had to explain the joke.
Thank you.
In the gay of Hormuz, incentivize extending that logic to Gulf supplies, whether through bilateral currency swaps, regional clearing arrangements, or digital currency-based trade channels insulated from U.S. sanctions control. I have no idea what the sentence I just said means. I copied it from fucking Reuters. It sounded smart. The war acts as a sort of acceleration mechanism for all of this, pushing an already visible trajectory towards financial multipolarity, not the end of the dollar overnight, but steady erosion of its monopoly in trade, reserves, and sanctions leverage. But now let's talk about point 3, the gay, straight, bisexual of Hormuz. Analysts cited by Reuters and other outlets warn that a 3 to 4 week disruption could push Brent crude well above $100 per barrel, with some scenarios forecasting spikes up to $120 or more if flows do not resume. This is not just a oil price spike that central banks can smooth over with a few basis point moves. Research on Asian economies already notes that sustained prices in the $90 to $100 range would push inflation beyond target bands into 2027, even for countries that are very relatively well managed. When oil and gas prices jump double digits in days, the cost increase propagates into fertilizer, transport, plastics, heating, everywhere. For the working class, that shows up as shrinking real wages, rent-energy trade-offs, and a renewed squeeze on basic consumption. Central banks are trapped in a kind of stagflationary dilemma. If they raise rates aggressively to fight energy-driven inflation, they risk detonating already fragile credit structures and choking off what little growth remains in post-pandemic economies. If they cut or even signal supporting growth, they, risk letting inflation expectations run wild in societies that have already gone through several years of cost of living crises. The Trans of Hormuz shock thus tightens a rope that was already closing. Structurally higher energy prices plus structurally higher interest rates, both converging on the same social body, and you have boom, chaos. That's why we call him J.D. Pondon. These are all contradictions that I've just listed out, and please listen back. Listen at 0.5, not because I'm very smart, but because you touch grass and you might not know what all of these terminologies mean. But all of this was going to happen eventually. Going at this war this way and then having Iran react to it the way it did has unironically, and this is not some Marxist cope, trust me, sped up all of these particular contradictions of semi-managed free market economies. And no region is more exposed to this particular dynamic than Europe, which already deindustrialized itself once by cutting off cheap Russian pipeline gas and now faces another energy shock driven by a war it cannot control, but proudly indirectly supports, except for, based Spain. European industry, especially in Germany, Italy, and Central Europe, was built around an input-output logic of relatively cheap, predictable energy feeding export-oriented manufacturing. And post-22, Europe replaced, pipeline gas with expensive LNG imports. Now with Hormuz disrupted and LNG carriers rerouting or pausing, those replacement supplies themselves become more expensive and less reliable. So, analysts have warned that benchmark gas prices in Europe could jump over 100% in the most severe scenarios, with some estimates pointing to TTF-linked contracts surging if Gulf exports are constrained for weeks, which they already are for at least a week, so we just need another week for it to be weeks. LNG and oil price spikes of that order render energy-intensive sectors like, fucking chemicals, metals, fertilizers, your mother, some machinery, permanently uncompetitive against U.S. producers sitting on domestic shale and against Chinese producers backstopped by the good old motherfucking state. Politically, this locks Europe deeper into the role of a U.S. vassal, dependent on American LNG, American security guarantees, American diplomatic framing of the Iran-Israel-U.S. conflict, and so on. Yet the same Atlantic posture that binds Europe to Washington also isolates it from the energy-rich and high-growth markets of Eurasia, where countries are increasingly trading outside the dollar and outside Western regulatory reach. It's in front of you, Europe. Just reach the fuck out. Get the KKK cloak off your fucking head. The cheap electricity and gas that underwrote the post-war social market compromise, they're gone, man. What replaces them is fucking austerity, camouflaged as green energy shit, where living standards must fall to maintain competitiveness, or competitiveness must be sacrificed to maintain a semblance of social stability. And that's where the sanctions meme comes in. Everything you've been listening to for the last 5 years. The logic of Western sanctions on Russian oil and gas was, Europe could absorb higher prices in order to punish Moscow while the rest of the world fell into line. But what did we get? Much of the global south bought Russian energy at a discount, often in non-dollar currencies, while European consumers paid more for the same molecules laundered through middlemen. I mean, in the current crisis, the unspoken joke is that lifting sanctions on Russian hydrocarbons, officially or de facto, becomes a backdoor necessity if Europe wants to keep the lights on without total deindustrialization. This possibility is straight out of, a decent econ major written blockbuster. After years of moralizing about cutting off Putin's energy, the same policymakers now quietly lobby for carve-outs, waivers, or off-book arrangements to tap Russian supply and stabilize prices as the poly-Hormuz remains uncertain. The meme almost writes itself. Brussels sweating under triple-digit Brent, suddenly discovering that maybe Russian gas isn't that evil, when German factories are closing and voters are burning their bills on the street. In that sense, the Iran-Israel-U.S. war is not an isolated fire. It is a convergence point. It exposes the hollowness of the U.S. security umbrella, accelerates the material infrastructure of de-dollarization, and deepens an energy inflation feedback loop that is reshaping class politics from the Gulf to the Danube. The missiles over Hormuz are writing new rules for money, for power, and survival in the 21st motherfucking century, and no amount of spin from Washington, Brussels, or Tel Aviv can put the genie back in the bottle.
Beautifully said, as always, Mr. Hugo. Let's bring her home. I've got 1 bit left, and then Hakeem's got 1 bit left. Then we're out. All right, theory time. So
just 2 more hours.
Yeah. We'll keep it to another hour. Okay, promise. So to understand how Marxists approach the Iran question, we have to look at some nerd shit. That's primary and secondary contradictions. In Marxist analysis, societies contain multiple contradictions, right? So between classes, institutions, social groups, stuff like that. But not all contradictions have the same weight at every historical moment. So the primary contradiction is the one that most decisively shapes political development. From a global perspective today, the primary contradiction surrounding Iran is the one between imperialist powers, led by the United States, and states in the global periphery that resist economic and political subordination. Within this framework, sanctions, sabotage operations, and military pressure are more than just reactions to Iranian domestic politics, right? They are structural features of a global system in which monopoly capital attempts to maintain access to resources, markets, and strategic territory. At the same time, Iran itself contains internal class contradictions. There's a clear contradiction between the Iranian working class and the ruling class, as well as tensions between state institutions and popular social movements. But the existence of internal contradictions does not cancel out the larger external one. And this is where Marxist analysis emphasizes the importance of historical sequencing, right? If imperialist powers succeed in dismantling the Iranian state through war or sanctions or regime change operations, the likely outcome would not be democracy or social progress. It would be state collapse and fragmentation. We have seen this many times. One of the strategic objectives that is often attributed to Western policy towards Iran is balkanization, right? The fragmentation of the country into competing ethnic, sectarian, or regional entities. A fractured Iran would totally remove a major independent regional power and replace it with smaller, weaker entities dependent on foreign support. So from the perspective of the United States and Israel, a situation like that would be strategically advantageous. A permanently unstable region justifies continuous Western military presence while preventing the emergence of a rival power. And the economic implications for the Iranian working class would be severe. Iran's oil and petrochemical industries are currently state-controlled to a pretty large degree, and these resources provide at least some basis for public spending and national development. And if the state apparatus collapsed, these industries would be very quickly privatized and absorbed by multinational corporations. Iran would almost certainly be forced into the financial architecture of predatory institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, bringing their usual goodie bag of structural adjustment policies and debt dependency and privatization. Even figures associated with pro-Western Iranian opposition movements have openly acknowledged the enormous profits that Western corporations expect to make in post-regime change Iran. And there's also a broader geopolitical dimension. Iran sits at a critical crossroads linking Central Asia, the Middle East, and Eurasian trade routes, like Akeem was saying earlier. It's like literally the most important place on earth. And destabilizing Iran disrupts land-based transport corridors that connect Asia to Europe. So higher energy costs and unstable transport routes place additional pressure on countries like China, forcing them into more expensive energy arrangements or into systems dominated by the US dollar. In other words, the weakening Iran can function as an indirect strategy to degrade the competitive position of rival economic powers. From this perspective, Marxists argue that the future of Iran must ultimately be determined by the Iranian people themselves, right? That includes the Iranian working class, which will continue to struggle against internal inequalities and political limitations within the country. But those struggles really must occur without foreign intervention or intelligence operations or externally imposed regime change. And when analysts attempt to present the conflict as, the Iranian government versus its population, they are not being honest, and they are obscuring the broader geopolitical reality there. So the central issue in this historical moment is the confrontation between Iranian sovereignty, however contradictory internally, and a U.S.-led imperialist system looking to reassert control over the region. A political position that ignores that, fundamental contradiction risks objectively aligning with imperialist interests, even if it presents itself as neutral or nuanced. Looking at you there, liberals. For Marxists, the conclusion is the one that we always come to in matters of sovereignty. The future of Iran should be decided in Tehran, not in Washington or in Langley or in Tel Aviv, right?
One little bit also about this, and then I'll enter into my section. If somebody can imagine a prerequisite for a nation of the complexities and contradictions of Iran, just like my nation, Iraq, for it to exist in a particular political setup, that necessitates a certain level of popular support for it to exist. If you can imagine the United States and the current American government having a mass of some level of popular support, which it does, unironically, there are tens of millions of people who agree with everything that's going on right now in the States, for wrong reasons, of course, but they do agree with it against their own interests. There are people who agree with what Israel is doing in Israel, against Palestine, Palestinians and in Palestine, because it serves their interests and so on and so forth. There are people who support what the German and what the Chinese, what the South African government, so on and so forth. Likewise is the same case for Iran, especially because Iran is so highly ideologized, and this is so foreign to a lot of, quote-unquote post-ideology, meaning like centrist liberal countries, where they think that, I'm apolitical, but that just means that you are whatever the fucking dominant zeitgeist of American foreign policy and cultural imperialist, formulated political opinions has dictated down to you that you just kind of unquestionably absorbed. In Iran, there it's just like it was in other countries where with more clear ideological education, I guess, or if you want to call it propaganda, whatever. There are people who actively support their government because they believe in its principles or its goals and so on and so forth, for better or worse, depending on what government and country you're talking about. I'm trying to give you a framework or a background for why that might be the case. But that leads into an important question, which is the woman question. Now, I'm not a woman, so I can't speak entirely on this, but I just want to give like a little rundown. The argument that military intervention in Iran is driven by some sort of desire to defend Iranian women is a classic example of imperialist humanitarianism, so-called humanitarianism. History is replete with examples that the quote-unquote liberation of women is frequently or solely invoked as a moral pretext for wars that ultimately result in the destruction of the very social infrastructure required for women's advancement, healthcare, education, social stability, so on and so forth. The strategy of quote-unquote saving women from their own societies is a colonial era trope. By framing Iranian women as some sort of passive victims awaiting a Western savior, this kind of strips, first of all, Iranian women, or any woman for that matter, of their own agency. It ignores their decades of internal struggle for rights or education or representation within their own society. The same political actors and pundits and just regular idiots like liberals on the street, the same people who invoke the quote-unquote rights of Iranian women frequently support policies or allies that disregard the rights of women in other regions, first and foremost being Gaza or in Palestine, or even within their own domestic borders, for example, through restrictive reproductive laws or whatever else, right? The defense of women... the idea that, a humanitarian intervention for the defense of women is not a principled commitment. This is disposable rhetoric or disposable rhetorical device that's used only when it aligns with specific geopolitical interests.
Right.
And like I can give 6,000 fucking examples of this. But I'll just mention like this. The female literacy rate in Iran skyrocketed from roughly somewhere in the 30% in 1976 during the great, liberator Shah, supposedly, to practically 100% now. It is higher than in the United States, the female literacy rate. Number one, Iranian women represent the majority of university matriculators, what do you call it, like the people, university students. And they consistently account for over 50%, closer to 60%, in certain segments also above 60% of the total university student population. Iranian women are globally recognized for their participation in STEM fields. Multiple studies and reports and so on and so forth have highlighted, including the UN, that women in Iran account for almost 70% of all STEM graduates in Iran, which is a figure that outpaces the United States and most European nations. This is not a product of some Western-style liberal education, but a result of a massive state-sponsored expansion of university access that prioritizes scientific and technical education for various reasons. Are there issues in Iran? Of course, absolutely. Imperialist war, though, and bombs killing Iranian women and girls is not the answer. And Iraqi women can answer for that example.
Yeah.
And finally, Hugo, could you please give us a quick rundown of some predictions that you have, possibly maybe?
Oh, I dropped that in your hands, remember?
Oh, shit. Oh, fuck.
Chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
There has been a misunderstanding in the preparation for this bit, so we will kind of do this off the cuff.
My hot take is that the big bet is basically the greatest poison of unipolarity ever, which is the Iranians will win if Americans complain about prices, and the Americans will win if hundreds of thousands of Iranians die, and therefore the state cannot continue this war. Yeah. That is the ultimate depiction of the insanity of unipolarity, where prices of chicken wings on one end stop wars and litter corpses of children, women, and civilian men on the other. Fucking.
Exactly. I know that's incredibly apt. Maybe we don't need to keep... I'll give just like the quickest TLDR. Oil prices will go up. Oil prices are required for... they're the primary predictor of general inflationary drive, so prices are going to go up all over the world for everything, transport costs, because you put something on a truck to bring it from place A to place B, the truck needs fucking gas to run, right? So everything's going to be more expensive. It's as simple as that. The vast majority of fertilizer that's used during planting season, right, or not vast majority, but a very large proportion is exported out of West Asia. And right now the Strait of Hormuz is closed, everything else is fucking closed. It's planting season right now. We're going to have reduced agricultural output, which will mean food prices will go up everywhere. All the necessary components for silicone, silicate, and anything high-tech that needs to be made has derivatives that come out of oil production. Less oil production in general and oil export means that those industries grind to a halt or slow down at least, which means that any sort of high-tech product being produced will be also more expensive, which means any services rendered by use of that high-tech product will also end up being more expensive. So TLDR, what I'm saying is the Iranians, all they need to do is just survive. And it doesn't matter. You can kill tens of thousands of people, you can destroy infrastructure, but as long as the state continues to exist, they win, right? Inversely, the Americans and Israelis lose as long as they're in the war. And then when they leave the war, they also lose, right? It's either their infrastructure and their people get killed and they lose belief or reassurance in their capability to defend their own populations, particularly for the Israeli case, and their military superiority, for example, which will cause other actors in the region, particularly paramilitary groups, to become more bolden and brazen to attack the Zionist entity, number one. And number two, a lot of people who are like, hey, we've invested tens of billions of dollars into getting the United States to include us in their defense umbrella, and the second one fucking, 2 days of missiles get lobbed around, the United States leaves, all their infrastructure is destroyed, and then they go and they defend their baby Israel, despite the fact that Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Emirates and whatnot have invested so much money in this. That also breaks American reliance on the United States, and also the geopolitical standing of the United States. It's a military embarrassment for the United States. This war is incredibly unpopular at home. Inversely, it is incredibly popular everywhere else because everybody, literally, unironically, everybody, right, is supporting one side over the other. It's clear. You go anywhere online, everybody is happy to see one area struck, one country being repeatedly hit, and watching their people, deal with the results of that, of being struck, so on and so forth. I'm not going to get put too fine a point on it. But TLDR, yeah, things are going to get a lot more expensive, and I don't know if the Iranians will stop. I hope. I can't say I hope they don't stop, but the Americans will just come back in another 2 months if they do. So we'll see what ends up happening. But hopefully we will see a liberated Palestine soon. You can't bring down Iran through an air campaign. You sure as fuck can chase out hundreds of thousands of settlers through an air campaign, though. So we'll see what ends up happening there.
It's the first time in my life that there's parts of a political science degree that make a lot of sense and you genuinely learn a lot from, but it's not analysis of international politics, as they call it. This is one of the first times in my life where it's actually applicable, because it's kind of like all the basic theory being applied directly, which is you can't just attack a country without expecting very heavy economic, at least, or widespreading demoralization effects on your country. I'm like, oh wait, what the fuck? That's happening. Words like setting precedent, which is a fake thing. Unipolarity doesn't exist, but now in this particular war, it does exist, because the precedent they're setting, that they are breaking, is the precedent that. Hey, it's always a win-win if you invite Americans to build a base in your country. Now you might actually get the shit bombed out of you. Precedents are now becoming a real thing. It's almost as if everything that was taught in political science presumed that we live in a multipolar world. And as we're getting closer to one, those concepts start existing. Wow, oh my God, king of the castle. So why did I do the Borat? I ruined my very well argued pitch, and I just ruined it. I'm sorry.
I want to add one last bit, and this is just to annoy JT, because
thanks.
This is the 2.5 hours now that we're at. This is literally the final point. For anybody who doubts the ability for the Iranians to sustain and the general overview that we've given, it's a simple math game, right? It takes between $500,000 and several $1 million per interceptor or whatever other method that you have to bring down one drone. The drone costs $20,000 to $50,000. Let's call it ballpark figure $30,000 to produce. $30,000 versus $3 million. And also, the drones can be mass manufactured at rates of several thousand per month. The interceptors can be manufactured at a rate of like 12 to like 30 per month, depending on which sources you're looking at. Even if you were to mobilize jets into the air to try to shoot these down, the price of the jet oil, like the fuel alone, which by the way will now increase as well because of this bullshit. The price of the fuel alone is more than like 8 or 10 or 15 fucking drones. Like it's so just, and not let alone the missiles that the plane will have to use to fire. They usually fire 2 to bring down one single drone. Like it's a joke. It's as simple as this. Ho Chi Minh said, "It doesn't matter if in the end we kill one of yours for every 10 of ours. In the end, you will tire of this war." About the Vietnam War. That's what he said. And to apply this, the Iranians are like, it doesn't matter if you bring down 10 of every like 50 drone swarms. In the end, you'll be the ones who will bankrupt themselves over this fucking war, right? It's a
good, great, brilliant point. Yeah.
And that's it. Thank you for listening to us. Let us know your comments and opinions about our analysis. And also, let us know if you like these more like thorough geopolitical dives that always fucking end up at 2.5 hours. That's not the point. I promise we're not trying. We thought this would be an hour today.
Yeah.
With that being said, thank you for your lovely support. Get all the extra episodes. Join the Discord. Talk to us on our monthly chats. Have a great time. And this has been the Deprogram. I'm Hakeem.
I'm JT.
I'm Ugopnik.
Margbar Amrika.
No.